Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. Consider the following pairs. We have the name of the paper or the journal on one side, name of the founder or editor on the other side. Mathrubhumi, Ramakrishna Pillai, the Hitavada, Gopal Krishna Gokule, the Indian sociologist Shyamji Krishna Verma. Which of the pairs given above are correctly matched? The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a reference to the Mathrubhumi. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we speak about Mathrubhumi, this happens to be a Malayalam newspaper. It is published in the state of Kerala and it was founded not by Ramakrishna Pillai but instead it was founded by K.P. Kesava Menon. Kesava Menon was one of the prominent Indian freedom fighters who fought against the British. In the year 1924, he also led the Vaikam Satyagraha in Travancore and he was also awarded the third highest civilian award, Padma Bhushan, by the Government of India back in the year 1966 as well. When we speak about Mathrubhumi, what does it stand for? It stands for Motherland, which happens to be a newspaper which was founded by K.P. Kesava Menon. When we speak about Ramakrishna Pillai, he was also a nationalist, he was also a writer as well, and he had edited one of the newspapers called as Swadeshabhimani. The article further makes a mention of number of other newspapers as well as the founders. When we speak about Lokmanya Tilak, he had nurtured Kesari and Maharatha. Gopal Krishna Gokule was associated with the Hitavada. Prabuddha Bharat was associated with Swami Vivekananda. And when we speak about Mahatma Gandhi, we have Young India, Navjeevan as well as Harijan. And finally, Shyamji Krishna Verma edited the Indian sociologist as well. These are some of the important pointers that you have to remember from the preliminary examination point of view. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to Pradhana Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, which of the following statements are correct? It is a scheme of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas for providing LPG connections to the women below poverty line households. Ujjwala would offer the beneficiaries a deposit-free LPG connection as well as free first refill and hot plate. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Indian Express makes a reference to the Ujjwala program. What is this Pradhana Mantri Ujjwala Yojana? When we speak about the society in India, it is the women who are mostly engaged in cooking in the rural areas. So what do? They do not have the LPG connections. So they have to get the firewood from a distant places. They have to carry these firewood and in fact the cooking happens with the burning of the firewood as well. As they burn this firewood, what would happen? They inhale these toxic gases and as a result their health would be impacted. So some of the non-communicable diseases like the heart disease, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer is what women face because of the toxic gases inhaled because of the firewood. In order to overcome this particular issue, LPG connections were provided to those families who were below the poverty line so that we could cover them with the universal coverage of cooking gas in our country. So what are the objectives of the Pradhana Mantri Ujjwala Yojana? To empower the women and protect their health, to minimize the health issues arising from the use of unclean fossil fuel and other fuel while cooking, to control indoor pollution from the use of fossil fuel which causes respiratory issues, to prevent the degradation of the purity of environment that is compromised by widespread use of the unclean cooking fuel. So who are eligible as part of this Yojana? The applicant must be a woman aged above 18 years. She must be a citizen of India. She should belong to a family below the poverty line and no one else from her family and household should own an LPG connection. The overall monthly income of the family should not exceed a certain limit, that which is prescribed by the Union Territory and the state government. The applicant's name should be in the SECC 2011 and should also match with the information provided in the BPL database of the oil marketing companies. The applicant should not be registered under any other similar scheme provided by the Government of India. Apart from the above, the applicant should also submit documents indicating her BPL status identity, so on and so forth. So the major objective of the Pradhana Mantri Ujjwala Yojana is to provide LPG connections to the women below poverty line. So the first statement is right, and added to it, Ujjwala would also offer beneficiaries a deposit free LPG connection as well as the free first refill and hot plate for these who are subscribing to the Yojana. Since both the statements are right, the answer to this would be both. Now let's look into the next practice question. Manpatch recently seen in news is an portable surface to air missile, unmanned combat air vehicle, nuclear powered ballistic missile submarine, fifth generation air to air missile manufactured by Rafael Advanced Defense System. The answer to this is portable surface to air missile. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Indian Express makes a reference to the manpads. So what do we understand by this? When we speak about manpads, they are nothing but the man portable air defense system. So this happens to be a portable surface to air missile. What does this mean? Let's say for example, there is an aircraft which is flying in the air, or let's consider an helicopter, or let's consider a drone which is flying in the air. So what would happen? These soldiers would be having these portable surface to air missile. They would be able to fire from the ground station, and as a result, this flying object which is present in air can be immediately destroyed. So this is designed to fire while mounted on a person's shoulder or on a tripod, whereby they would be able to shoot down the aircraft as well as the drones. So remember, the manpads are the portable surface to air missiles which are mounted on a person's shoulder or a tripod, which are used to destroy the aircraft or the drones which is flying in the air. Some of the examples that we can look at is Stingers, which is from the United States of America, and we can also take the Russian example of Igla S. What are the concerns associated with the surface to air missile? This is manufactured in number of countries, as we discussed, in United States of America, Russia, United Kingdom, so on and so forth. These are the state actors which should possess these manpads. But unfortunately, there has been illicit proliferation where some of the non-state actors also possess these surface to air missile. When these non-state actors possess, it means it can also be used for the detrimental purposes. In fact, there have been examples in the past as well where civilian aircrafts have also been struck by these surface to air missile, which are the major concerns associated with these surface to air missiles. Now let's look into the next practice question. Who was the accused in the Central Assembly bombing case along with Bhagat Singh? Rajguru, Sukhdev, Batukeshwar Dutt, Ram Prasad Bismil. The answer to this is Batukeshwar Dutt. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Indian Express makes a reference to the Bhagat Singh. What is it about the Central Assembly bombing case? This involved Bhagat Singh as well as the Batukeshwar Dutt. What did they do? They threw a bomb in the Central Assembly at Delhi from the visitors' gallery. The idea was not to kill people. The idea was not to damage the property. The idea was not to hurt the people as well. The idea was only to make sure that their voice is heard. There were people whose voice were not heard. They wanted to put out their objectives. They wanted to throw against the imperialistic ideology. So they wanted their voice to be heard. So in order to ensure that their voice is heard, they threw the bomb in the Central Assembly at Delhi. They also threw pamphlets, raised pre-revolutionary slogans, and they wanted their message of revolution, anti-imperialism. So they chose this platform to put out their viewpoints. Nobody was hurt in the incident, and it was never their intention to cause physical harm to anyone. Their stated aim was to make the deaf hear, and Bhagat Singh was the mastermind behind the incident, and he was inspired by Auguste Valiant, a French anarchist who was executed by France for a similar incident in Paris. In the trial that ensued, both Singh and Dutt were sentenced to transportation for life. Now let's look into the next practice question. We adopted parliamentary democracy based on the British model. But how does our model differ from that model? As regards legislation, the British Parliament is supreme or sovereign, but in India, the power of Parliament to legislate is limited. In India, matters related to constitutionality of the amendment of the Act of the Parliament are referred to the Constitution Bench by the Supreme Court. Select the correct answer using the code given below. The answer to this is both 1 and 2. When we look into the first statement, yes, the Parliament in United Kingdom is sovereign. They would be able to change and amend any of the laws when it comes to the United Kingdom, but that is not the same when it comes to India. In India, what we have is a basic structure doctrine which puts a stop to the amendment proceedings that are initiated by the legislature. So basically, they would be able to change, they would be able to modify, they would be able to introduce new things, delete new things, but they should not amend any of the provisions with respect to the basic structure doctrine. So the first statement is right, and the second statement is also right, that the constitutionality of the amendment of an act of the Parliament is referred to the Constitution bench, where the Constitution bench is nothing but a bench of the Supreme Court having 5 or more judges on it, where they would try and understand if that particular law is substantive in nature, questioning the very interpretation of the Constitution. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2021. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. We have taken up this article from the Indian Express. So the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention and Prohibition Readdressal Act was passed in the year 2013. It defines what the sexual harassment is. It lays down the procedure for a complaint and inquiry and the action to be taken, and it is based on the Vishaka guidelines. So what are the Vishaka guidelines? It imposes 3 key obligations on the institutions, which is about prohibition of the sexual harassment, prevention of the sexual harassment, and ultimately, in case the sexual harassment has been conducted at the office premises, how this has to be taken care of, what is the readdressal procedure, is what is the sexual harassment at workplace all about. Let us try and understand what is the definition of sexual harassment. When it comes to sexual harassment, it includes any one or more of the following unwelcome acts or the behavior. It can be direct or it can be indirectly as well. So what is sexual harassment? Physical contact or advances towards a woman, a demand for request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or any other physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature will fall under the sexual harassment. Further, if the woman is put through a suffocating environment in the office premises, that can also fall under the sexual harassment as well. It includes implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in her employment, implied or explicit threat of detrimental treatment in her employment, implied or explicit threat about her present or future employment status, interference with her work, or creating an intimidating or offensive hostile environment, and humiliating treatment likely to affect her health or safety. All of this will fall under the sexual harassment. This can be done by her colleague, it can be done by a person in that particular premise, or it can be done by a higher authority in that office environment. So who is a person who will fall under this particular category of aggrieved women? It can be a person who is working in that particular office, it can be a person visiting a workplace, or it can be a student as well. So the domestic worker, regular, temporary, ad hoc or daily wager who is working for remuneration or on voluntary basis, employed directly through an agent, or contract workers, probationers, trainees, apprenticeship called by any other such name. If there is a woman working in such premise, she will fall under this aggrieved women category. So what would happen if there is a sexual harassment at workplace that has taken place in an office environment? What would happen? This woman would be able to file a complaint with the internal complaints committee. So this particular internal complaint committee will have to be established in all the offices or in the branch offices where it has 10 or more employees. So if that particular office has 10 or more employees, in such a situation, the internal complaints committee will have to be established by that organizational body. So after which, if there is an aggrieved woman, this aggrieved woman has an issue, what would happen? This complaint will be raised with the internal complaints committee, and this has to be raised within 3 months from the date of the incident. So there is a limitation period as well, but this limitation period can also get an exception if that particular complainant is able to showcase, is able to express the grievous nature of this particular issue. So the ICC may take up this particular complaint. It may look into this particular case personally, or it can also complain the same to the police officers as well. If it happens to take up this particular case, it has to investigate this case within 90 days, and once the inquiry is completed, the internal complaints committee will have to provide a report of its finding to the employer within 10 days, and the report is also made to both the parties as well. So the identity of the women, the respondent, witness, any information on the inquiry, recommendation and action taken, the act states should not be made public. So who is the respondent, who is the person who's filed this case, should not be revealed in the public or in the office premises. And once this report is submitted to the employer, there are two options that we can look at. One, there is a person who's committed this sexual harassment. So when such things are done, what would happen? The company will look into its service rules, and this person can be asked to leave the office. He will be terminated from the office, and he may have to leave the office immediately. That is because it might be mentioned in the service rules of the companies, and these service rules are not same. It might be different for different people, and in case there is a monetary loss that the women has gone through, compensation will also have to be provided by that particular person who put the women in the sexual harassment stage. That is one option. The second option is that there is this aggrieved woman who's filed the wrong charges, or it has been a malicious complaint, or it is a false evidence where it is to vilify another individual who happens to be a man. In this particular case, the employer will look into it, and suitable actions will have to be taken against this woman as per the service rules. If the both the parties, either it is the man or the women, are not happy with the report, they can also go to the court of law as well. These are some of the procedures that are given in the prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.